American Public Media.
Terrell Hogan Law.
I'm Wayne Hogan. When crossing traffic lanes, always watch for motorcyclists. Taking a moment to look can save a life.
More at TerrellHoganLaw.com. The North Florida TPO is committed to shaping our transportation future. We're focused on planning, funding, clean fuels, and new technologies for a vibrant, connected community. Learn more at northfloridatpo.com. Baptist Health is a proud supporter of First Coast Connect. Baptist Health, committed to building a healthier community for all of us. More info at 202-4YOU or baptistjacks.com.
This is WJCT News 89.9 Jacksonville. Up next, national and local news from NPR and the WJCT News team.
Good morning, I'm Ann Schindler, and on today's First Coast Connect, it's the biggest stories of the week. The St. Johns County Airport Authority gets fired by its own law firm. A widow files a wrongful death case in the high-profile murder of her husband. Protests about a new jail begin before a plan even takes shape. The governor proposes DOGE 2.0 in Florida. Lawmakers look at abolishing state property taxes, and violent threats disrupt schools around the region. We'll talk about that and more with our panel of journalists on our Friday Week in Review. Later, coffee and merch are the latest stars to hit the St. Augustine Amphitheater. You can join the conversation on air by calling 904-549-2937 or emailing firstcoastconnect@wjct.org. It's all ahead this hour after the day's news.
Live from NPR News, I'm Korva Coleman. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky is in Washington today to meet with President Trump. They're supposed to sign a framework agreement on sharing Ukraine's raw minerals with the United States. NPR's Joanna Kakissis reports from Kyiv.
Zelensky is visiting the White House a little more than a week after Trump called him a dictator and repeated Kremlin talking points, including that it was Ukraine, not Russia, that started the war. Anna Kolesnik, a communications manager in Kyiv, said she's happy the meeting is taking place, but worries it could go poorly.
God help us not to lose a lot, meaning our territories, our raw materials or our mines.
Trump and Zelensky are set to sign a preliminary minerals deal in which the U.S. would get revenue from some of Ukraine's natural resources in exchange for future aid. Joanna Kakissis, NPR News, Kyiv.
Today is a legal deadline set by Chief Justice John Roberts of the U.S. Supreme Court involving a lawsuit against the Trump administration. Groups are supposed to comment on the Trump administration's move to freeze certain U.S. foreign aid funding. A lower court had ordered the Trump administration to lift its freeze and pay the bills. But NPR's Frank Langfitt reports the Chief Justice stepped in and moved the lower court judge's deadline to pay up to today.
These are among the first cases in front of the Supreme Court that involve the president's attempts to expand executive power. And after all, in these cases, the government had effectively refused to pay money that Congress had already appropriated and the government clearly owes, and that this judge had told it to pay. And the government says in one of its filings that it thinks the lower court exceeded its authority in doing that. And so people are watching very closely now to see how the Supreme Court responds to all of this.
NPR's Frank Langfitt reporting. Israel's military has admitted to failures that it says left it unable to protect the public in the October 7, 2023 Hamas-led attack. Militants killed nearly 1,200 people and took more than 250 others hostage. This is based on new findings the Israeli military released from an internal investigation. NPR's Kat Lonsdorf reports from Tel Aviv.
The investigation found that, quote, glaring intelligence failures had allowed senior Israeli officers to underestimate Hamas's capability and intentions leading up to the 2023 attack. It's the military's first official account of mistakes that preceded the attack, the deadliest in Israel's history, which launched the war against Hamas in Gaza that killed more than 48,000 Palestinians. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has not commented on the investigation, and he has not taken responsibility for the attack, saying he will answer questions only after the war ends. Many Israelis blame Netanyahu for the failures leading to October 7th and want a wider inquiry by the government. Kat Lonsdorf, NPR News, Tel Aviv.
This is NPR.
You're listening to WJCT News 89.9 in Jacksonville. Good morning, I'm Stephen Ponson. It's now 9:04. St. Augustine is inviting residents to learn more about the ins and outs of their local government through a new Citizens Academy program. The 6 free sessions will give 20 people the opportunity to better understand what the city's various departments do and how important decisions are made. Citizens Academy applications are available on the city's website at citystsaug.com. The deadline is March 9th. The program officially launches on Wednesday, March 26th. 65 years ago, a group of high school students staged a peaceful sit-in at a segregated lunch counter in downtown Tampa. Chris Young reports local leaders honored the civil rights activists yesterday on the anniversary of that historic protest.
The Woolworth sit-ins began in February of 1960, when a group of Middleton and Blake High School students refused to leave segregated food counters until they were served. Leroy Long was a freshman at Blake High School when he attended the sit-ins. Now, decades later, he says the fight is ongoing.
We have to keep working. We got to be vigilant, because if we don't, then a lot of things that we work to get to can disappear.
The event also highlighted an upcoming play, When the Righteous Triumph, about the sit-ins. I'm Chris Young.
It's going to be beautiful this afternoon here in Northeast Florida. Highs will reach the low to mid 70s today. We'll also have clear skies and some light winds, and that's going to lead to a cooler evening. Once the sun goes down, temperatures will drop into the lower 60s.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include the estate of Joan B. Kroc, whose bequest serves as an enduring investment in the future of public radio and seeks to help NPR be the model for high-quality journalism in the 21st century. This is NPR.
Support for First Coast Connect is provided in part by Baptist Health and North Florida TPO.
Opinions expressed on the First Coast Connect Week in Review are those of our panelists and do not reflect the views of WJCT News 89.9.
Good morning and welcome to First Coast Connect. I'm Ann Schindler and it's Friday, which means it's time for our First Coast Week in Review. Among our topics, Governor DeSantis wants to take a DOGE approach to state agencies and college spending. State legislators are considering eliminating property taxes. The murder of a local Microsoft executive is now the subject of a wrongful death lawsuit. Grassroots protesters object to a $1 billion jail. The St. Augustine Airport is dropped by its lawyer after alleged Sunshine Law violations, and schools are repeatedly disrupted on the First Coast after fake threats of violence. To talk about all that and more, I am joined by Katie Jeffries, Good Morning Jacksonville anchor at First Coast News.
Hi, good morning.
Great to have you here, Katie. We're also joined by the legendary Frank Powers, recently retired but veteran assignment manager at News4Jax. Hi, Frank.
Good morning, Ann. Enjoy the chocolate.
Oh, thank you so much. Frank brought me chocolate today, y'all, so I'm a happy camper. It's a good Friday. Jack Webb, also here. He is an attorney, but also a former Jacksonville City Council president. Good morning, Jack.
Thanks for having me back. Good to be here.
Good to have you. And we're also joined via video by Noah Hertz, St. Johns County reporter at Jacksonville Today. Hey, Noah.
Morning, Ann. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining us. Frank, let's start with a spate of school threats that have paralyzed schools from St. Johns County to Nassau County just in the last week. What happened this week?
Well, you had Landrum Middle School go on lockdown because a guy made 2 calls saying, I want to kill children. That turned out to be a hoax. And then in Nassau County, an 11-year-old from Hilliard said he was going to pull a school shooting. They went to his house. He admitted it. And, kudos to Sheriff Bill Leeper, who's following the lead set by Volusia County Sheriff Mike Chitwood. He posted the kid's name and mugshot on the website. It's sad that it's come to this, but the school threat hoax craze is out of control. Some accountability needs to be instilled into these kids. And if people say, well, you're just shaming these kids, well, you know what? Too bad. The people who it happened in my grandson's school, there was a threat. My son, acting on cautions that we're not sending to school that day. The fear and apprehension that is thrust upon parents whose kids are at these schools. I've heard it firsthand. I'm sure you have too, Katie, when people calling to say, what's going on? Do I take the kids out? I tell them, 99.99999% of these threats are BS. They're hoaxes. They're just aimed at stirring stuff up, but you got to do what you got to do. And if this puts an end to this, fine. I'm no problem with it.
11-year-old mugshots, Katie. Frank is in favor of this. Perp walks for 11-year-olds, which is something we saw down in Volusia County with the sheriff there. Does this have an impact? Is there any sense in the community that putting out a mugshot of an 11-year-old, whether or not it gives some satisfaction to people like Frank Powers, has any impact at all?
Well, it obviously is going for the shame factor, and you are hoping that maybe their families will step up because obviously their parents are going to be shamed by this as well. We, at least in news, we have to be very careful with publishing and using the names of juveniles. It's something that we call it like a red flag alert that we send out to be careful because there's someone under the age of 18. And I believe we have not published the 11-year-old's face or name. Because they are a minor. That being said, it's out on Facebook from the sheriff's office and other places.
Public record.
But it is something that now will be searchable for the rest of this child's life. When they're 18, hopefully they don't do things like this anymore, but this will still follow them.
Yeah. And so there were, you mentioned Landrum, Hilliard Elementary School impacted, but also Pacetti Bay and St. Johns County this week. All of them deemed fake. But Jack, to Frank's point, this is an all-hands-on-deck emergency for all of the agencies. The FBI has to get involved. The local agencies have to respond. It is no small cost. It is definitely stressful for the parents and the kids.
Yeah, well,
and the teachers.
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad Frank went there, so I didn't have to. But I mean, there is, you're limited. I mean, it's very frustrating for law enforcement, for authorities, for school officials, because all you're doing is you're moving from a proactive mode to identifying real threats to a reactive mode. So, what do you do now? You want to shame them, but is it shame or is it fame? Does this ultimately increase it? Or will it decrease it? I don't know. It is the proliferation of social media. I mean, for good, bad, whatever. It's not like picking up the landline and calling it a threat, a bomb threat. 25 years ago. Now it's proliferated throughout. But the same on the other side. With the Google. I mean, with the posting of the website, posting of the mugshot. I mean, it'll be there. I mean, it's like nuclear waste. It's not going anywhere.
Yeah, Noah.
We're talking about an 11-year-old kid.
Right,
so.
right. He's got a long life ahead of him, presumably.
Yeah.
And hopefully better choices. But Noah, you cover St. Johns County, and as we mentioned, there were a couple of schools impacted. This is as Jack says, it requires a total realignment of law enforcement priorities in that moment, and it can be expensive.
Yeah, I'm glad you bring that up, just because, my focus throughout this entire thing is kind of the immediate reactions and the immediate chaos. And I say that because when stuff like this happens, it's reporters like us, like my colleagues in our office and like the folks in the other newsrooms around the area who are getting messages from parents and from teachers saying, hey, what's going on? Hey, I drove by this school and I saw a bunch of cop cars. What's going on? And so, I was up at 7 a.m. one morning this week texting the school district's PIO asking like, hey, I'm hearing some reports of this, what's going on over here? And then texting the sheriff's office PIO and going, hey, I need information because I need to tell these parents what's going on. It's tricky, and it screws up everything that the sheriff's office might be working on at the time. I know I can speak for sure. I heard from folks at the school board that when the threat was made against Landrum, for instance, students had to be rerouted to a different school. And so now you've got a logistical, once they've deemed that this is not an actual threat to kids and it was just a hoax, now you've got the logistical nightmare of having to bus kids from one school to another. So I think it's easy to forget and easy to not realize that the destabilizing effects that this stuff can have, not just on district operations and sheriff's office operations, but also just on everyone's mental health involved. I mean, you have to treat a drill like it's the real thing. You have to treat a hoax like it's the real thing. And that is traumatizing for everybody involved.
Sure, it is a scary thing. And we know that at least at Landrum that morning that there was a very real sense this was happening. Kids were being moved into classrooms for safety by their teachers.
Law enforcement has to take every one of these seriously, because as sure as God made little green apples, the one they don't is the one that turns out to be real, and then they'll be eviscerated. It's just a disruption. It's a heartbreaking disruption, not at every level, not just for law enforcement, with the school, the students, the parents. And if arresting kids that young is the way to make this go away, fine and dandy.
Katie, you've got very young children, and that is something that parents think about increasingly when they're dropping their kids off at a daycare or a school. Your kids are not quite at that level yet. They're still very young.
They're not, but even their daycare does drills.
Really?
My son came home one day and was talking about everybody in the bathroom and be quiet. And I was trying to understand, and he's only 4. And then I realized, I'm like, oh, they were doing, I guess, an active shooter drill for his daycare, putting all the kids in the bathroom and then everyone be quiet. And obviously he doesn't understand what it's for, but and this was not a threat. This was just a drill that they were working with the kids. But it does make my heart sad that, so young, he's already starting to learn these things, and he will be starting school soon. And that is a concern of mine. When I tour schools and I'm looking for his next step, security is one of the first things I ask about. Do these doors lock? Do you have a guard here? Like, that is one of my first questions.
Jack.
With regard to the comment I made before, reactive versus being proactive, maybe the proactivity should kind of encompass education, perhaps, and, plaster it all over the schools. Here's a picture of somebody in handcuffs, or here's a stick figure in handcuffs. Right? This will happen. And again, these are the consequences. This is what it costs a school district. If you don't be stupid. Don't be stupid. Resist the impulse, because if you don't, this is what will happen to you. And let's see where that goes.
Yeah, well, we'll keep watching it. I want to move on now to a topic that is a national level that could soon become a state story. The governor wanting to creating a DOGE-style task force here, says he wants to review 900 state jobs, as well as university spending, and possibly eliminating 70 boards and commissions. Jack, I know you have some thoughts on this.
Here we go again, right? As I said before, he is no longer running for president, so he needs something to do. So he's going to mess with colleges. He's going to mess with the universities. He's going to audit local governments. As I said before, idle hands are the devil's workshop. Here we go. He wants, and tied in with this is, okay, you're going to do all this. What are you going to do? Now you're going to eliminate property taxes, which accounts for, I think, 60% of our budget here in Duval. This happened a long time ago. Wasn't so much the DOGE stuff, but it was the property tax stuff, where I think it was 2007, 2008, when they rolled back the millage rate, and we got stuck with three fees here in Jacksonville.
At the state level, they
rolled it back. So again, I have no problem if the governor wants to examine this stuff on the statewide level. That's fine. But I find it ironic and disheartening that these so-called conservative Republicans are always conservative until all about home rule and self-governance until they get to Tallahassee, and then they want to tell local governments what to do.
I mean, a lot of the people in Tallahassee, Jack, are people that were here on the city council.
I know they were, and that's the point. That's the whole point. It's like, really, you fancy yourself this conservative Republican, all about home rule, all about representation on the local level, until you get to Tallahassee. And then, again, it's all about a power grab in Tallahassee. And I think that's what a lot of this is.
Yeah. Katie, this is work that is not scheduled to conclude until March of 2026, if this task force does as the governor has instructed. We don't know yet who's going to be on this task force, but in an ever politicized Tallahassee, we can guess that some of those appointments might hew towards the conservative and probably be closely aligned with the governor's priorities.
Yeah, when you talk about the criteria for rooting out waste or programs that they feel are not benefiting, I guess the question always is, well, where's the criteria for that? Who's making those decisions? Like you said, is it just people from one political side deciding what is good and bad in this budget? So that's going to be a huge question. What's the criteria? How are you going to figure out what you're going to cut and where this is going to come from? But with the property tax, if that goes away, one of the questions, at least we talked about in our news this week, was, does that mean sales tax will go up? You have to make up for that money somehow to be able to pay for things with police and fire, schools, parks. So would we see a jump in our sales tax to kind of make that up?
Yeah. Noah, I think that the early estimates indicate that if they wanted to plug that hole, in addition to some budget cuts, they would probably have to hike the state sales tax to 12%. It's currently 6%, so it would essentially double that. And then, of course, there's additional sales tax levied at the local level. But that would be a big jump, and some people are concerned that that would be regressive in terms of our tax policy.
Exactly. And I've seen some chatter online from even the most conservative folks there are who are concerned that this would just be a further centralization in Tallahassee. I mean, it is, I understand the impulse to want to balance the budget and ensure that the money is being spent correctly, but this is a case of a state where we have had a Republican-dominated Congress, a Republican-dominated legislature for decades now, and now we are going to turn the attention towards centralizing power in Tallahassee. I mean, the concern there then becomes if we are to roll back budget decisions that are made by local governments, or if we are going to then eliminate local government's ability to actually raise their own money, that Tallahassee would be the final decision on where money goes and why. And I've seen a lot of people concerned that it would be, I think you could very easily see political motives slipping into those kinds of decisions as well.
If you're just joining us, I am talking to reporter Noah Hertz, anchor Katie Jeffries, former assignment manager Frank Powers, and former City Council President Jack Webb. If you'd like to join the conversation, you can give us a call at 904-549-2937. You can also email us at firstcoastconnect@wjct.org. You can watch our program live stream right now on Facebook or YouTube, and you can reach out on social media. Frank, I want to ask you about the question of who this would impact most and the power shift, because the state government doesn't rely that heavily on property taxes. It's a much smaller proportion of the overall budget. They get most of their money from sales tax. But local governments really would be impacted, and this is things like schools and fire and police.
And it would be, about a $55-60 billion shortfall? It would have to be made up. Well, they would try. The local governments would try to make that up. But remember a couple of years ago, St. Johns County wanted to raise 1 penny of sales tax. They're at 6 cents. The limit is 7, like Duval and most other counties. And they wanted to address a $500 million backlog of infrastructure. It got blown out of the water. It lost 60-40. And in hearings before the St. Johns County Commission, people came and said, well, let's make the tourists pay for it. Make the tourists pay for your police and fire protection, your roads, your libraries. Sure, it's not realistic. And Noah made a good point. The Florida Republicans have been in control of the legislature for 30 years. So if there's all this waste, then who created that?
Well, that's a good point. So, I mean, the legislature has been Republican-dominated, led since 1998. The governor's seat has been a Republican seat, Jack, since 1996.
Since
Jeb Bush.
Walking Lawton.
Yep.
Yeah.
Right. So, I mean, what motivation would they have to find this waste? Would there be some pushback from the legislature who maybe wouldn't want to be seen as wasteful when it has been, in fact, a lot of their decisions?
Perhaps. I think so. I think what Frank is getting to, this is a solution in search of a problem. Like you said, the Republicans have been controlling the state for, the last couple generations politically. So what's the issue here? Would there be pushback from the legislature? Perhaps, because, everyone wants to cut it until it's your ox that's being gored, right? Okay. Everyone, these boards exist for a reason. They were created by somebody. They didn't arise out of the ether. So I think there probably would be some pushback. Again, going back to the centralization of power in Tallahassee, it's real because the sales tax are we're prohibited here locally from enacting a sales tax. We know that well, which is why municipalities, counties are in large part relying upon ad valorem taxation, and it is what it is. I mean, I think when we dealt with this issue years back, I think it was Rubio when he was Speaker of the House. He was trying to enact some comprehensive ad valorem reforms in the legislature, not necessarily eliminating sales tax, but he took a hard look at it. It might be time to dust that off and take a look at what makes certain it's equitable, but at the same time, we're talking 58.6% of our budget here in Duval is dependent upon ad valorem.
I want to take a call
That's a lot of money.
Got Dean in San Marco on the line. Good morning, Dean. Go ahead.
Good morning. To your conversation about bomb threats and children, one of the fundamental solutions is for parents to have discussions with their small children, not to ever get caught up in the judicial system because it is a dead-end road.
Thanks, Dean. Appreciate that. We've also got a call from Linda in Mandarin. Good morning, Linda. Go ahead.
Good morning. I think we could safely say that DeSantis' announcement was quite performative. He's the head of government. He can do an audit without announcing it to the world, but he has been out of the headlines recently. So he sees how much the chaos that Trump is causing Trump to be talked about all day, every day, and he's needing to figure out a bridge between now and in 26 when he ends, and maybe what the legislators did at the beginning, trying to rebuff him. He wants to show them who's in charge. So we need to be prepared for a lot of chaos on top of the national chaos that this could input upon our community and gnashing of teeth. So Republicans, get to talking with your other Republican brothers and sisters at the state level because chaos is coming to the state of Florida. Again, thank you.
Thanks, Linda. We also have a comment from Tom on Facebook saying inefficient university spending. You mean like Division I football and its $1 million coaches?
Or the money
Those are
that
fighting
was
words in the
spent
South.
by during the brief tenure of Ben Sasse at the University of Florida. That is now the subject of an investigation by the Florida Attorney General's office.
Not related to Division I anything, but just to his spending while president. Do you think that there is a effort here to further align with the president? And we know that there's been a rift between the DeSantis administration and the president. Do you think that this is a way to kind of make his position more in keeping with the MAGA priorities?
Well, a thoughtful and measured examination of state government and where cuts can be made, that's the way to do it, not the let's rush through and break things approach that Elon Musk mistakenly thinks is going to work at the federal level. 900 jobs in the Florida workforce, it's not a lot. There are probably some efficiencies that can be found. And again, this is going to be, almost a 2-year process. Who knows what the Florida political landscape is going to look like then?
Yeah, that's true, Jack.
Yeah, it's interesting. There are parallels here from, between what DeSantis is doing, and he is mimicking Trump to a certain extent, much like Trump wants to mess with the IRS, eliminate income tax, right? And wants to heavily rely upon tariffs, right? Make the outsiders pay. That's pretty much what DeSantis was saying as well. We're going to eliminate ad valorem taxes. We're going to make the outsiders pay. We're going to put it on the backs of the tourists, and that's kind of like de facto tariffs, right? So there are some real parallels here.
Yeah.
Baby Trump.
I want to shift gears now, Katie, and move on to a wrongful death lawsuit that was filed in a local murder case. This is a very high-profile case. You are, as Frank says, the attorney.
Reporter of record on this.
Reporter of record on this now. You've covered it from the very beginning. What does this lawsuit seek?
So this is a wrongful death lawsuit. It filed in civil court a week ago. It was filed by Kirsten Bridegan, the widow of Jared Bridegan, who was murdered in February of 2022 in what police say is a murder for hire. Currently, his first wife, Shanna Gardner, her second husband, Mario Fernandez, and then a man named Henry Tenon, who has pled guilty to being the basically trigger puller in this. It's against all three of them. for wrongful death, but it is seeking damages in excess of $100,000, of course, for loss of economic support, grief, anxiety, emotional support, pain, suffering for their children as well. But what was really interesting in reading this document that was filed was that it also alleges there were fraudulent transfers. Money is a huge thing in this case. Of course, it's a murder for hire, but also Shanna Gardner comes from a very wealthy family.
The accused,
Shanna Gardner. And she and Mario Fernandez have pled not guilty. That'll go to trial in October. But there are questions about where some of the money went when she sold her home in Sanctuary Boulevard, back there in the Sanctuary neighborhood. There's also a question about where the money went when Mario Fernandez sold his home. But also, there was talk about a Navy Federal Credit Union account under Fernandez's name that had $250,000 that was closed a month before Jared was murdered. And that money was moved to unknown accounts, the documents say. Also, Shanna Gardner's irrevocable trust was closed. So they're alleging there was fraudulent activity with this money so that it couldn't be recouped in a civil lawsuit. So now Kirsten Bridegan has filed this civil lawsuit, even though, of course, we still have to go to trial in the criminal case. We have civil litigation in this as well.
And so this is a wrongful death lawsuit, and it's focused on the finances. But we should not forget that Jared Bridegan was this 33-year-old father of four who was actually killed in front of his 2-year-old daughter.
Yeah, it was a horrible crime. And that's one of the reasons it's been such a high-profile case. He had just dropped off his 2 older children, his 2 children from his first marriage, at Shanna Gardner's house. As he was leaving, going down Sanctuary Boulevard right by JTB, he stopped to move a tire that had been placed in the roadway. As he got out, he was shot to death. His 2-year-old daughter was in her car seat, witnessed this whole thing. And it was a horrible crime. Bullets barely missed her. Thankfully, she was not hurt. And so now we have Shanna Gardner, her second husband, Mario Fernandez, both facing murder 1, possible death penalty. And then Henry Tenon has already pled guilty to second-degree murder. But, as I'm sure you all know, in January, he had an outburst in court claiming false testimony. And we're still waiting to see what happens with all of that.
Yeah, and I want to get to that. But Jack, first, how common is it to have a wrongful death lawsuit filed while criminal charges are still pending in a case?
I don't think it's common, but it's not uncommon either. I mean, especially in cases as egregious as this. And to the point, if there's been fraudulent transfers of the money, you better file the suit as quickly as possible to start that process, start the forensic examination, because recovering these assets is near impossible. I mean, I've had some experience in dealing with these kinds of matters, and especially here in Florida.
Why is that so hard? Explain to us.
Well, here in money has, I was asked one time, does my client have a forwarding address? I said, my client doesn't have fingerprints. All right. I mean, that doesn't reflect of all of my clients, but that's kind of the way it is. I mean, it's difficult. Again, I mean, you can move property into your homestead here in Florida, and it's protected. And good luck recovering that money pursuant to a fraudulent transfer theory. So it's money has a way of dissipating, of going away. I mean, just look at the Panama Papers. I mean, look at the efforts that people go to hide assets. And if she's from an affluent family, those resources are going to be available to her.
Yeah. Frank, this has obviously been a huge case in the local media. Do we think that there'll be additional information that they would be able to access in a wrongful death suit? We know that the standard is different. It's not a beyond a reasonable doubt. It's a preponderance of the evidence.
Evidence, right.
But do the rules of evidence change in terms of what they're able to get to?
There are still subpoenas that, if you get hit with a subpoena, you have to do your best to respond to that. The wording in this lawsuit was fascinating in a number of ways. First of all, it goes to what I have to believe is the strategy by the prosecution to separate Shanna Gardner from Mario Fernandez. It says that once that Jared was dead, Shanna no longer needed, that's a direct quote, Mario as a husband. The indictment said from the start that this plot was hatched in 2015. They were still married at that point, Jared and Shanna.
Shanna and Jared Bridegan. Yeah,
they were still married then.
Uh-huh.
It was all about money. He wasn't working. He was going to school. Her parents were subsidizing their life. They were getting almost $9,000 a month for living expenses. He got used to that. They decided to get divorced. He's the one who files for alimony. According to court documents, this infuriated Shanna and her father, who at one point, again, according to court documents that were released, offered to pay him off $250,000 just to be done with him. Now, where does this put Fernandez? He starts to look like, the patsy, because he gets the job done. Again, according to these are all in filings, hundreds and hundreds of pages and documents. Then what they want to do is have Mario turn on Shanna. There's going to have to be one trial for each, maybe one trial with two juries, because you're going to invariably wind up with what's called an antagonistic defense. One's going to say he did it
because they're married
because they're married. So we had that in the JA case. We had both of the defendants had one trial but two juries. Way back in the Dubose brothers trial for the Drashana Davis murder, we had one jury for one of the brothers and one jury for the other two brothers. It's going to have to be something like that. There's no way that happens in October. They're still fighting over the evidence. They're still fighting over Henry Tenon's comments of what he did or did not say. We haven't even gotten into the death penalty amendments yet. To think that trial is going to go ahead in October, no way.
Noah, I want to ask you about that. I mean, Frank is pretty good at predicting these things when it comes to trial schedules and delays, since a long part of his career was making sure that those cases were covered. But this case, has St. Johns County ties, obviously, because Jared Bridegan lived in St. Augustine, even though he was murdered in Jacksonville Beach.
Mm-hmm.
Is it a case that is still getting a lot of attention down that way from people? Is it still as closely followed as it is in Jacksonville?
I mean, I obviously can't speak for every single person down there, but I certainly have not heard near as much buzz down in St. John's about this case as I hear up here in Jax. It's an awful thing, and it's an awful thing that I think people don't want to think can happen in their backyards. But honestly, I think it's one that maybe it has just gone on for so long at this point that people aren't paying attention to it as closely down in St. John's anymore.
Mm-hmm. Jack, when Frank talks about this serving the prosecution strategy, I mean, this is a separate case. This is not a criminal case.
Mm-hmm.
The allegations in this wrongful death suit do try to set up the Mario Fernandez, Shanna Gardner's current husband,
Mm-hmm.
as somebody that she, from the very beginning, hoped to use to further her scheme to kill Jared Bridegan.
A useful idiot. Yeah.
So, but is there any coordination between the people on the civil side and the prosecution in terms of maybe helping to drive a wedge between these two defendants so that Mario would maybe flip on his wife?
I don't know if there would be any coordinated activity or cooperation, but I'm sure that there would be a telephone call or two during the course of discovery. I mean, because as you were alluding to before, the issue, the discovery available to them in the civil matter is very broad. I mean, the standard is relevance. I mean, as long as it's calculated, the requests are calculated to lead to perhaps what is admissible evidence, it's fair game, subject to a motion for protective order. So,
and how is the standard of something that's relevant different from what criminal court requires?
Relevance is relevance, but I mean, it's got to relate. I mean, it's got to have some bearing. So, to the extent that they're seeking financial records, I mean, that goes to motive, right? It goes to culpability. To the extent that they're seeking discovery of financial documents from the parents.
But is that different than what they would be able to get in on the criminal side?
I gotta tell you, Ann, I'm not a criminal lawyer. I have family members, from time to time, but aside from that, I would.
Aside from your criminal family members, you might want to walk that back a little, Jack. Get in trouble. So I want to switch gears if we can. There's actually, I'm sorry. Before we do, I just want to ask about the false testimony allegations, because I did say we would return to that. And Katie, I want to make sure that we do explain what you're talking about there. Henry Tenon made an outburst in court. What was he saying, and why was that of concern?
Sure. So he had pled guilty to second-degree murder and said he was going to testify in the upcoming trial back in March of last year. And then in a January court hearing, he came out and asked to speak to the judge. The judge said, no, talk to your attorney. And then he said, I want to address my false testimony. And they cut him off right there. Talk to your attorney.
Whose jaw was dropped by that point.
Yeah, who said he was surprised by that. He was removed from the courtroom, and we haven't had him back in court since. I believe he'll come back in April. But so right now we don't know what he was referring to, if he meant the overall crime, if he meant something else within his testimony. It's very unclear. But of course, Mario Fernandez's attorneys, and so has Shanna Gardner's attorneys, really jumped on that comment to try and find more. They've requested his jailhouse phone calls to see who he was talking to. So still a lot to dig into with that comment.
So he hasn't been back in court, but the attorneys have been back in court. And there was this hearing that you were at where his attorney said, I thought maybe he'd been threatened by someone in the jail. That was my initial concern, is he had been threatened and was going to recant his testimony.
Talking to? Right.
But in that hearing, they did ask his attorney, did you substantiate that? Was there a threat? And he said no.
Yes.
That was not his motive.
Yeah, and he also in that statement, I believe, asked for a new attorney. And he still has his current attorney. It sounds like he wanted to stay with his current attorney, who is a public defender. So, but of course, now that that's out there, that's something that the defense is going to jump on, that he made a claim of false testimony.
Sure. And you mentioned Frank. I mean, that was probably Al Chipperfield's worst day in a long while. He's a great attorney for the public defender's office, but he was obviously very surprised by his client's statement.
Last time I was on the show, we talked about this case, and I went flying over there. Katie was already in court, and there was a moment where the defense was saying, we want everything, and the prosecutor was going, we'll give you everything, but everything is nothing. There's nothing there. You can have the jail call, you can have everything you want. There is nothing to share that indicates that he has, that he has changed his testimony. He just blurted it out in court.
Well,
Mr.
they also
Chipperfield
said
thought that maybe somebody in another jail inmate was just trying to, hey, look, you got an opportunity here to ball up the system. Take it.
But they also said that there was nothing to show from a meeting that occurred, but like after this outburst between Henry Tenen, his attorney, and prosecutors. And the defense team is saying, for the other defendants, we want whatever happened at that meeting. What was discussed? What did prosecutors ask? What did he say about his outburst? And prosecutors are saying nothing, that nothing happened at that meeting.
Neither did Alan Chipperfield say that anything happened at that meeting of consequence that would bolster the hope by the other two defendants that he was walking back his confession.
But surely something happened at that meeting.
Surely something did happen, probably to the point where, why did you say that? And then he explained why he said it.
Jack, your take.
I think Frank might be right. I mean, what happened at the meeting? Probably said, well, I did it just just to ball up the system and whatever. So did anything happen at the meeting of substance? It seems to me, though, that, what a mess.
Yeah. It was transcribed, so the defense, whatever, will get word-for-word transcription of that meeting.
Presumably.
At some point.
Yeah. All right, I want to shift gears and talk about the St. Johns County Airport Authority. Noah, this is a story that is rooted in a district that you cover, obviously, in St. Johns County. But this week, the board of the authority quit in a very public manner. Can you just kind of catch us up on what happened?
Yeah, we go from something that has a very long tail and a very long paper trail and a lot of reporting surrounding it to something that is about as much of a developing story as it could possibly be. We don't have a lot of facts at the moment. There is a lot of hearsay. There's a lot of information that has been delivered to various outlets by way of anonymous sources. But what we can confirm right now is that last weekend, the law firm that was functioning as the general counsel for the St. John's Airport Authority, which is the elected board of representatives of commissioners who oversee the, what are they called now? The Northeast Florida Regional Airport, who in about a year's time will probably be called the St. Augustine Airport. But that's another thing you can put a pin in and we can return to that later. The general counsel that represents them, Douglas Law Firm, they sent a letter to them that it was obtained by the news media and published online that said, look, there are commissioners on the airport authority who are knowingly violating Florida's sunshine laws. Specifically, they noted that there had been documented or observed violations of sunshine laws that prevent elected officials from meeting up together outside of public meetings to talk about things that are going to be at public meetings, things that they would vote on, as well as violations of rules that make it so that sitting elected officials cannot vote on things that would personally affect them financially without disclosing that. So conflicts of interest. Along with that, their letter also says that they're, amid warnings for all of this, that members of the general counsel had been retaliated against. I'm looking at the letter right now. It says that there was retaliatory behavior that they believe to have perceived. So the airport authority is now without a legal general counsel. It's tricky because I've tried speaking with some of the folks who are involved with this in the airport authority, and everybody is saying that this is a legal matter. They don't want to talk about it. They'll talk just about it later. The law firm has been pretty tight-lipped about any additional specifics regarding this stuff. So, like I said, there's a lot of hearsay flying around right now, but at the moment we have a law firm saying that a small board of elected officials is potentially violating Florida law.
And so we have that letter. It does seem, Jack, a rather public announcement by a law firm. I mean, it seems to me they would have had every opportunity to resign in their capacity as the general counsel without necessarily implicating the board members in sunshine law violations and conflicts of interest. So tell us what might be happening there.
Well, it's really interesting. I did some research on the Douglas law firm. This guy Douglas is a pretty sharp character. He's a young guy, very, very smart, and very convicted, very ethical. From what I can see online about him, and it raises an issue, an ethical issue under the Florida bar rules, is who's the actual client. He's not representing the individual board members. He is representing the board, the elected entity, the board. So what duty does he have to disclose? Well, it may be to the board, which is what he did. Now, you have a problem here that the board is a public entity, so arguably the communication to the board it would be a public record. I mean, here in Jacksonville, we have what we call shade meetings. When we want something to be privileged, we go into we order a shade meeting, we go into it, and we disclose attorney-client information that's protected, and then we come out of the shade. He didn't do that in this instance, perhaps because he was prohibited from doing so because the very people he needed to blow the whistle on that were causing the issue were those persons that would be responsible for conducting the meeting in the shade in the first place. So what I'm finding really surprising here is the lack of accountability. That is, all right, what about, as Noah was saying, they appoint their own counsel. What about a county attorney? I mean, we have a general counsel's office, which is effectively our county attorney. Where's the county attorney for St. Johns County? I understand it's an independent agency, but that begs question. What role? What's next? I would not be a bit surprised if there was a grand jury investigation as to what's going on down there, and it might be appropriate.
Frank, this has been a troubled agency. You can definitely speak to that.
Hot mess is the way. For years, going back, 2022, you had a crash involving a nationally known stunt pilot. She survived the crash, flipped over in the marsh. They couldn't get to her in time. She drowned hanging upside down in the cockpit of the plane. And the NTSB report found that one of the factors was the fire department at the airport was closed at the time. So people had to be called on site, get to the thing, and then they found the gate's locked, further eroding time that Marianne Fox needed to survive. Well, she didn't make it. They did get her out. She died at the hospital. There was a contentious board meeting after that in which pilots, including Len Tucker, who's now one of the board members, said this authority is playing short shrift with public safety. There were calls maybe for a public safety review of the airport. I don't think it ever happened. There was a time the executive director of the airport authority was fired. They brought in a new guy. He then resigned, although he had a friend of his go to the next meeting and read his resignation letter. So then you got a third executive director.
Is that the current one?
I'm not sure if it's the current one or if there's been a fourth one there. But
yeah, I mean,
a
I can
third
say
member
for certain that
of the board said, I want a public investigation, independent investigation. To me, that says state attorney's office.
Noah, just briefly.
Yeah, I was going to say, I can say for certain right now, I've only been covering St. John's for about a year now, but right now the airport authority has an interim executive director. So that just goes to show that there has been a lot of turnover here.
And you hear anything about a likelihood of it in any kind of larger investigation, Noah?
At the moment, I have not heard anything certain. I would not be surprised if something happened. I mean, this reminds me a lot of the case with the Mosquito Control District Board that you had me on a couple of months ago to talk about, where that board was approving illegal bonuses for themselves and cutting themselves checks. The tricky thing with boards like this, though, is that since they are elected officials, it's not as easy as the police burst in and go, hey everybody, we heard you're breaking a law, quit breaking the law. It's a totally different set of guidelines for figuring out wrongdoing and then potentially prosecuting it here.
All right, we'll have to leave it there. Katie Jeffries, Frank Powers, Jack Webb, Noah Hertz, thank you all so much for being here this morning.
Lively show.
Thank you.
One. Good to have you. Coming up next, big changes are brewing for the AMP in St. Augustine. Just in time for concert season, we'll tell you about a new coffee shop and merch store.
Terrell Hogan Law.
I'm Wayne Hogan. One text or call can wreck it all. Learn more through distracted driving presentations for teens and the workforce. Arrive alive. Let's end distracted driving.
More at TerrellHoganLaw.com.
The Jacksonville Music Experience presents the JME Soundstage Series, featuring Shannon and the Clams, Raw Hill, Levitation Room, Ghost Funk Orchestra, and a lineup of local and regional artists. For ticket information and more details, visit jacksmusic.org/JME events.
The Academy Awards are Sunday. On the next Fresh Air, we'll hear from 3 Oscar nominees. In the film The Apprentice, Sebastian Stan, who portrays a young Donald Trump, and Jeremy Strong, who plays the infamous Roy Cohn, who mentored Trump. And Adrian Brody talks about playing the immigrant outsider in The Brutalist. It's a situation familiar to his family. Join us.
Today at 1 on WJCT News 89.9.
On the next Florida Roundup, what's in the drinking water? Maybe not fluoride. The state surgeon general recommends local water systems do not use fluoride. Melbourne has voted to stop adding it to their water. Port St. Lucie has stopped temporarily. Lee County voted to stop. Fort Myers voted to keep it. So, does your drinking water have fluoride added to it? Do you want it or not? Email us, radio@thefloridaroundup.org. I'm Tom Hudson. Then join us Friday noon until 1.
How bad is the bird flu outbreak? The USDA says it's planning to spend up to $1 billion to limit the spread. Its new leader insists wider federal cutbacks won't hinder her response.
It is important that we go through this process if we have any chance of right-sizing the government, which most people in this country think is too big.
Also on the Friday News Roundup, the House passes a spending bill, town halls get heated, and how much for a new gold card?
Today, starting at 10 on WJCT News 89.9.
Welcome back. Well, there are some exciting new changes at the AMP in St. Augustine, not just the lineup, but also a new coffee shop that has partnered with the amphitheater. Joining me to talk about what music fans can expect this season, Diana Markovitz, Director of Public Relations at St. Johns County Cultural Events Incorporated. Hi, Diana.
Hi, good morning, Ann.
Great to have you. We're also joined by Spencer Hooker and Megan Vidal. They are founders and co-owners of the Kookaburra in St. Augustine. Welcome.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
You guys are sort of taking over St. Augustine bit by bit, parcel by parcel. Kookaburra started as just one little store, and now there are, what, I don't know, 5, 6, how many?
8.
Wow. Fantastic. So that is a really big success. And so congrats on that. What prompted you to want to open a Kookaburra outlet or store at the AMP?
Well, actually, we have worked with the amphitheater in the background for several years now. We do things like custom labeled coffees for the artists that come through. We have done private events for them.
Custom labeled coffees, like named after the bands?
Yeah, exactly.
Come on.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
So can you give me an example?
Ooh. I mean, well, basically, we print the band name on a bag of coffee
I
for
gotcha.
them and,
Gotcha.
try to
That's fun.
incorporate their artwork into the label.
The AMP does a lot of that kind of personalization of stuff, and they do take care of their bands really well. Do you, though, have a fan base, so to speak, in the clientele of the amphitheater that is clamoring for coffee? I mean, usually it's a place where people go and have a cold beer, but I guess coffee is a great alternative.
Yeah, we luckily the whole staff of the amphitheater is really excited
They
that we're
probably
there
need
as
it
well.
more than anybody. Yeah.
And then I think that the neighborhoods right around there, it's all locals that live around the amphitheater, so they were really excited to have something close and easy to get to.
And this isn't just during AMP hours, right?
No, 7 days a week, 7 a.m. to 5 p.m., and then open during shows.
And it's part of a merch store? Is it adjacent to or actually incorporated within the physical store?
It's incorporated in the physical store. So you walk in the door and you've got the box office, so you can actually purchase concert tickets, grab a wonderful cup of coffee, and shop for a T-shirt or a blanket, poster, hat, koozie that's representing the amphitheater.
How did this come to be?
Well, we've always wanted to have a retail store. And we know that people love to come to our box office because when you come to the box office, you save on those online fees.
Yeah.
You don't pay them. And then you can also talk to us about, hey, I've got mobility issues, or I like this. I like to watch from this side of the stage, and we can help formulate or, really make sure that you have the best personalized service when you come to the box office. And then we said, well, why not also have a coffee shop there? We love the Kookaburra. We love what they stand for. They aligned with our core values. And there really is a shift sometimes for concert attendees not to have alcoholic beverages.
Mm-hmm.
So it's nice to say, hey, I'm going to be up kind of later than normal. Let me go get a shot of espresso or a honey badger and stay up late.
Yeah, I've noticed several shows recently where they kind of have a tent or a booth that's set up for people who are no longer drinking. It's kind of a support system.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, it is. It is a big movement right now. And we offer free water to people. You can bring in your water refill, Nalgene's and everything. So we wanted to just offer another option for people that may not want to have an alcoholic beverage, and it really works out well.
So I'm looking forward to a very busy April.
Yes,
there is so much on deck, and I think it's going to be grueling, but there's a big season ahead. So can you just give us some highlights?
Yes, absolutely. Well, we've got 43 shows on the books, and we're constantly announcing. So people ask us, do you have a season? When does it end? When does it start? And we are really only down 2 months out of the year because of weather. Other than that, I mean, if an artist wants to come play, if Allison Krauss says, hey, I want to come play on December 26th, we're like, come on down, Allison, let's do this. So 43 shows on the books right now, plus more announcing. We're really excited. We've got comedian Nikki Glazer. As you know, she just has skyrocketed since she hosted the Golden Globes. Jason Isbell in the 400 unit. Diana Ross is coming. Wilco. And we've got 3 nights of Widespread Panic and Billy Strings. Billy Strings is playing arenas now. So to have someone of Billy Strings' caliber play a small venue that's 4,800 seats, that's a huge opportunity for us. And he's playing 3 nights, and a lot of people are coming from out of town for that one. So these are some of the big ones that we're looking forward to. And then you've got hometown heroes like JJ Gray and Mofro and Tedeschi Trucks band playing as well.
Yeah, and is this the first Tedeschi Trucks show that will be there?
It'll be the second one, but they're playing 2 nights.
Okay. Well, a lot ahead. So we should say that in addition to coffee, you guys sell these fabulous Aussie pies. You have sort of an Australian connection. Just briefly, can you tell us about that?
Yeah, sure. So my mother is Australian. My father was American. So I kind of grew up with both influences. Megan is born and raised in Colorado. That's where her and I met. So when we decided to open this business, we just wanted to incorporate all elements of our families, our upbringings into the business.
Mostly Spencer's one, though.
Yeah. All right. Well, congrats on all the success of the Kookaburra and the new location. And Diana, I'm sure you're going to have a great and busy season at the AMP.
Thank you. We'll see you at some shows. Hopefully, and some
100%.
listeners will come out for shows as well.
Oh, yeah, 100%. And I know that people will be headed down. So Diana Markovitz, Spencer Hooker, Megan Vidal, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
And thank you for listening. That's our program. If you missed anything, you can catch our rebroadcast at 8 o'clock tonight. You can also find our entire archive at WJCT.org or on your favorite podcast platform. Join us Monday when we celebrate the incredible career of longtime journalist Matt Sorgel, who has announced his retirement. I'm Ann Schindler. You've been listening to First Coast Connect on WJCT News 89.9.
Support for First Coast Connect is provided by Baptist Health and the North Florida TPO.
Baptist Health is a proud supporter of First Coast Connect. Baptist Health, committed to building a healthier community for all of us. More info at 202-4YOU or baptistjacks.com. The North Florida TPO is dedicated to transportation planning, funding, clean fuels, and new technologies for a vibrant, resilient, and connected region. More information available at northfloridatpo.com.
On the next Electro Lounge, we'll be listening to the Penguin Cafe, telepop music, weather tunes, and so much more. Forget the news and join us for the Electro Lounge at 9 p.m. Saturday night, only on WJCT News 89.9.